In this speech, I will be evaluating the segregation law that used to be in place and the actions and events that were taken to get equality. This law was put in place back in the 1800s. According to history, segregation is the practice of requiring separate housing, education, and other services for people of color. Segregation was made a law several times in the 18th and 19th century. America, as some believed that black and white people were incapable of coexisting. This was put in place to keep whites and blacks away from each other because people thought that whites were superior to blacks. Blacks were treated in harsh ways than whites. There were major differences on the way cops treated blacks from whites. Police would arrest blacks sometimes without having a legal reason. Sometimes they were harassed just for being black. Even in the courtroom, they were treated different. Blacks were given more harsh sentences than whites. There were actions that led to equality like peaceful protests and also violent protests. Overall, I think what was done to get equality for blacks was very effective. Martin Luther King was one of the most effective protesters during this time. He led many of the nonviolent protests. According to Constitution Daily, he was able to get together 250,000 people and they listened to his I Have a Dream speech, and 60,000 of them were white. What he was able to fight for equality and not do it violently was very effective. It was effective because not only did he do this with not only was he able to do this without getting violent, he was able to get people together and fight as one. Also, so many people were arrested for peacefully protesting. They couldn't fit any more people in jail and started to change. The way that Martin Luther King went about getting what he wanted was also effective because the world started to realize that it's possible for whites and blacks to come together as one. An event that was very effective was Brown versus Board of Education. According to Britannia, this is a case in which on May 17, 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unanimously that racial segregation in public schools violated the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibits the states from denying equal protection of the laws to any person within their jurisdiction. The decision declared that separate educational facilities for white and African American students were inherently unequal. Although the 1954 decision strictly applied only to public schools, it implied that segregation was not permissible in other public facilities. Considered one of the most important rulings in the court's history, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka helped to inspire the American Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. This case was effective because it was at the end of segregation and helped prove that it is our right to be in the same building as whites. That segregation was breaking the 14th Amendment and helped to end segregation. It was also helped toward equality because now there were schools in which both races, blacks and whites, are in public facilities. It was proven that there is a place that whites and blacks are allowed to be at the same time, and that we, blacks and whites, can come together as one. Malcolm X was a figure that was effective, but I don't think he was that effective toward freedom and equality. According to Stanford, Malcolm rejected King's message of nonviolence. He respected King as a fellow leader of our people, sending King articles as early as 1957 and invited him to participate in mass meetings throughout the early 1960s. Although Malcolm was particularly interested that King hear Elijah Muhammad's message, he also sought to create an open forum for black leaders to explore solutions to the race problem. King never accepted Malcolm's invitation, however, leaving communication with him to his secretary. He was not effective to me because he sought out to deal with the race problem with violence, which doesn't get anything solved. If violence was involved, then the police and others would have a reason to keep trying to treat blacks as the way they did. Blacks would get arrested for an illegal reason and wouldn't be able to do nothing about it. It would go against what blacks were trying to do with Martin Luther King Jr. and what so many others were trying to do peacefully. Rosa Parks was an effective leader who played a role in turning segregation into equality. According to NPS, Rosa Parks instigated the struggle for racial inequality. When she refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Parks was arrested on December 1st, 1955, that launched the Montgomery bus boycott that 17,000 black American citizens. A Supreme Court ruling and declining revenues forced the city to desegregate its buses 13 months later. I found this event to be effective because Rosa Parks not giving her seat, she started a movement. She got people to start boycotting buses, which brings people together and causes a problem for the bus companies. This causes 17,000 people to follow along with Rosa Parks and end up getting buses desegregated, which is a big part of fighting toward equality. In conclusion, all these people and events had a big part in some way in the process of gaining equality, with Rosa Parks and her fighting for her right to sit anywhere on a bus, and Martin Luther King Jr. being nonviolent protester really helped and was very effective toward equality. Overall, I do think the process and events were all effective because years later they were able to gain more equality for blacks, and now the world we live in is becoming a better place for everyone in general.